Now go to the agenda. Number 1, to approve the minutes of the overview and scrutiny 26th of November. All approved. Thank you. Just to remind councillors that as you are in attendance today, you agreed to this meeting being recorded, and thank you for that. Apologies, please.
Chairman, I've received apologies from councillors Bond, Chapman, Harrison, Holmes, Perry, Jackson and Williams.
Thank you. Agenda 3, declarations of interest. No declarations. Thank you. I will now go to the agenda 4, which is the minimum term financial strategy, and I will go to Becky Meir to present.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a presentation, so just got to get the technology working. It's worked. Right. Yes. So the purpose of this evening is for scrutiny committee to scrutinise and ask questions on the draft budget and MTFS prior to its approval. So you'll have had the detailed report, but I'm going to just take you through this presentation to summarise the position. So I'm going to cover the draft MTFS position and reserves, the assumptions and inputs to the MTFS, the Section 25 statement, and I'm also going to follow up with some information on the funding reform consultation and the potential impact of that, and that's something that we've been working on since the MTFS has been produced. So it's not included in the report, so I'll go into a bit of detail on that one. So in terms of the draft MTFS position at the moment, this table is a replica of table 1 from the MTFS report, but it focuses on the first 3 years of the MTFS. You'll see that the forecast deficit increases significantly in the year 2026-27. And the reason for that is the business rates reset, which I know that we've talked about a number of times, and I will touch on that a bit further on in the report, the presentation too. Just to note that it may well, these figures may well be updated to take into account the updated Q3 revenue monitoring position, including our business rates position, if those are agreed in time for the final report. And at the moment, the indications are that both of those positions are positive compared to what we've got factored in for Q2. So this table is a replica of table 2 in the MTFS reports and shows the impact of the forecast deficits on the council's general fund reserves. So you'll remember that our minimum general fund reserves position is currently set at £1.5 million. And with the current assumptions, we can just about maintain this reserves position across the 3 years. Which is what our general fund reserve strategy is at the moment. So what's causing the increased deficit or reduced reserves? And we've talked about this a number of times, but we know that the council's strategy has previously been to spend more than its in-year funding due to expected growth in business rates in future years coming from developments such as WI and ROF. So the council hasn't wanted to make cost reductions if they're not necessary, because our funding will increase again in future years. However, MHCLG have now confirmed that funding reform and the business rates reset will happen in 26-27. And this means that any growth in business rates that we've had up until that time will be lost. So the table in the middle of the slide there shows you the impact that may well have on our business rates income between 25-26 and 26-27. This slide doesn't build in any transitional protection, but you can see that there's a significant reduction there between 25-26 and 26-27 in our business rates. We have built transitional protection into our MTFS at the moment, but this was prior to the release of the consultation document on funding reform and our external advisors modelling following that. So I'll touch on that later on in the presentation. Also contributing to the increased deficits are a reduction in our new homes bonus and the funding guarantee grant that the government provides no longer protects us to ensure we see a 4% increase in our core spending, but it just maintains our core spending at the same level. So that funding has also reduced. So I'll pause there at the moment just for any questions on the current or the draft MTFS position. I'm also happy to take any presentations at the end as well if anyone would prefer. Is there anything at the moment at this point?
Councillor Allen?
Is there a reason behind the new homes bonus reduction? I actually haven't read anywhere anything about why that's actually happening. And secondly, is the 954 extension included in the business rates reset? Because I notice you've only mentioned WMI and ROF. And I'm wondering if, because most of the businesses obviously be established by the time we get to the end of the year, whether they are included or excluded from the calculation. Thank you.
Through you, Chair. Yeah, in terms of the new homes bonus, it's only continuing for 1 year. So that's one of the reasons, but also there is a formula for how it's allocated and you have to hit a certain threshold to get the grant. We've only just gone above that threshold, so our funding isn't as high as we were hoping it would be. So that's the reason for that one. In terms of I-54, it's an enterprise zone. So at the moment, that funding basically comes into the council and then is paid over to Wolverhampton and Staffordshire County as part of the borrowing that was taken out to develop that area. In future, that will be exempt from the business rates reset, but obviously there's no agreements at the moment about what happens to that funding moving forward once the borrowing is paid off. So I've not factored anything into the MTFS for that at the moment.
Any further questions? No, thank you, councillors. Any
So next on to the assumptions and inputs into the MTFS. We've been through this a number of times. It's all outlined in the report as well. So I'm not going to take you through all of this in detail. Just wanted to highlight the main points to you. The first one is that the council tax referendum limit remains at £5 for districts. Second one, as I've mentioned, funding reform from 26-27 will include an up-to-date assessment of need, which will build on the previous government's fair funding review. And the move will be gradual and government will invite views on possible transition arrangements, which I will talk about those at the end of the presentation as well. And then lastly, the intention is to reset the business rate system. As I mentioned, just the enterprise zones are exempt from that. So any growth in the enterprise zone at I-54 will not be reset. But in terms of consultation, there has been an initial consultation on objectives and principles which came out with the provisional settlement. Consultation on a technical detail of the business rates reset will be published in early 2025. Consultation alongside detailed plan for reform will be published ahead of the provisional settlement for 26-27, and then it will be implemented to begin through the multi-year settlement that will be published for 26-27. So those are the main points that came out of the provisional settlement and the policy statement. And then in terms of other assumptions, sorry, this is probably a little bit small for people to see, but it is all in the report. Again, just to highlight the main points to get across to you. So business rates reset we have assumed for 26-27. Assuming transitional protection of 85% in that year and then 75% in the second year. New homes bonuses I've mentioned continuing but at a lower level, and that has been confirmed in the provisional settlement, and the minimum funding guarantee again at a lower level, and doesn't cover the reduction in the new homes bonus which was confirmed in the provisional settlement. Collection fund reserve, which we're using to maintain minimum general fund reserves. We're assuming that will be roughly 3.7 million at the end of this financial year, and we won't need to call on it before 26-27. And lastly, the extended producer responsibility funding that has recently been announced, we are assuming does not require any additional expenditure and can therefore be used to offset grant reductions to support the overall budget. That's the assumptions and inputs. Again, I'll pause just to see if there's any questions around that one, but hopefully there's no surprises there.
Councillor Allen again.
Not a surprise, but just a reflection on the occupancy rates, which are quite critical to our budget. And look, you've got a worst case scenario factor in this, about 72%, if I remember rightly. Thank you for doing those calculations, because it does enable us to see what the variation is possibly. And we do know that with the increased national insurance contributions, that workplaces are under some threat. Is there any indication yet that any of that occupancy rate is threatened at all?
Through you, Chair. Not at the moment. We're not seeing an impact from the economic effect of those national insurance contributions. We've had some vacancies across the estate, but mostly they've been as a result of the Unit 4E and the movements in those, so tenants moving into bigger buildings and vacating smaller units. But there's lots of interest in those units, and we've I think we've managed to fill most of those at the moment. So the indication is that we're not seeing that at this point in time.
Any further questions? No, thank you.
Then the next section that I wanted to touch on was the section 25 statement. This is a statement that usually gets lost within the MTFS, but I wanted to try and bring it out because it is starting to become more important that the messages in here are really heard by everybody. And so from my point of view, as statutory officer, I am responsible for producing these statements, and basically what it does is to confirm that the budget that we're putting forward is robust and that the reserves are adequate. So as I've separated this out from the MTFS separate appendix this year, and the two areas really it talks about why the budget is robust. So it talks about the impact of the external environment. So we know the economic climate is still uncertain, but we are factoring in the impact of that into our assumptions, and we also now have the potential impact of funding reform as well, which we're factoring in. In savings plans, a number of authorities I know have to build in savings to be found in their MTFS positions moving forward when they know there's a gap that still needs to be covered. Fortunately, we're not in that position, so I'm not in a position where I know that there are some gaps that we still haven't covered in the MTFS moving forward, and I won't be coming to you part way through next financial year in the monitoring to say, oh, actually these savings aren't being achieved. That's positive. And also in terms of risks and mitigations, they're set out in the section 25 statement, but mainly I think our biggest area of protection is that we have a number of reserves, earmarked reserves and our general reserves, and they are in a good place at the moment to protect us from a lot of the negative things that might come along over the next couple of years or so. And that also sort of covers the adequacy of the reserves as well. Still consider 1.5 million to be a reasonable minimum level of reserves, having looked into it and into the risks. What I've also done is to look at the SIPA Resilience Index and our external advisors resilience dashboard. And that's detailed in the section 25 statement, largely positive there. So our sales fees and charges income is quite a high proportion of our total budget, which protects us and means that we're in control of that income rather than government. And our unallocated reserves as well are at a high level in terms of our net current expenditure budget. So those are both positive. The only one that's and more of a negative one is our low council tax base, which we're all aware of. We know that we're a low council tax council, but that's all been built into the MTFS, so it's not overly concerning. We will obviously be looking at alternative budget options that can be implemented if risks materialise. But at the moment, my judgment is the budget is robust and our reserves are currently adequate as things stand. That was the section 25 statement. Any questions on that? we all look in one direction.
Any questions, members, please? No?
The level of reserves at 1.5. As a percentage of our budget, that's quite a small percentage. But and you know, you said you looked at SIPRA as well, so I'm reasonably content with that. What is concerning me now is for the future, should we have redundancy payments and things like that backing up towards us, that is not an adequate reserve, those types of expense. I should record my deep regret at the way in which this has all been sprung across everyone, and that I'm even having to think that right this moment. But I am conscious that it will possibly become our responsibility to make sure that we have enough reserves in the budget to meet all our demands. And this particular one is not something which we've even thought about yet. And I'm not asking you a lot of questions about this, Rebecca, because it's like throwing dice at the moment and nobody's really quite sure or certain about how we're making our way forwards in money terms. But I do think our reserve is low, and I'd be interested in your opinion about how can we raise that reserve should we need to, because we've only got a short time frame.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. In terms of the, just referencing the redundancy costs potentially, my understanding is that that will be built into the liabilities or commitments for the new council, whatever that looks like. So that's not a concern at the moment for me, but I do appreciate that the work that may well be involved over the next couple of years will probably mean additional costs. But I am still comfortable that although our minimum level of reserves is set at 1.5 million, we've still got quite a significant amount in our general fund reserve and in our earmarked reserves that are ring fenced to protect us against that. So although those earmarked reserves are set aside for specific purposes at the moment, if it means that we're not able to do those things anymore and we have to redesignate them against other commitments, then we will need to do that. And that's something as part of looking at the alternative budget scenarios we will be doing as a leadership team.
Thank you for that reply, and thank you for the assurance for staff, because I think we'd all like to express our concern for them and for their futures, as well as looking at our own liabilities.
Councillor Steele.
Yes. Is that what? Oh, couldn't see. Sorry. Went wrong position. Well, on the same tack, then, should the district council be abolished, what would happen to any reserves? Has that been talked about? Thank you.
As I understand it, they will be transferred to whatever the new council is.
Then we need to keep our reserves as low as possible then.
I do have to remind everybody that we still have a best value duty.
Councillor Duffy.
Thank you. Probably a newbie question, if I can still call myself that. When we're talking about reserves, looking at your report, you would talk about general fund reserves, earmarked reserves, and allocated earmarked reserves and unallocated earmarked reserves. When we're looking at the number of where we'll be in towards the end of the medium-term financial plan, is that just the general reserves, or is that all of those reserves together? Thank you.
It's just the general fund reserves that we're looking at in terms of that bottom line.
So our position is healthier if one considers the unallocated and the allocated earmarked reserves for specific projects that may or may not be needed in the future, which is rather uncertain. Okay, thank you.
Any further questions, councillors?
Thank you. So last section from me. So this won't be in the MTFS or the report that you've had because it's taken from the consultation that was published with the provisional settlement. And so we've been working on that since, I have to confess, I didn't fancy working on it over my Christmas dinner. And so since we've come back after Christmas, we've been working on understanding what that consultation means at the moment. Which is why it's not in the papers that were in the MTFS that was put together before Christmas. So it's just to explain at the moment what the potential impact of funding reform and business rates reset might mean for us. So as I said, the consultation was issued with the provisional settlement, but it's a consultation on principles and objectives at this point. So there is no real information in there for us to build anything into the MTFS. But the proposals that are in there are so that business rates reset will happen in 26-27, and there will be more frequent resets after that. So that means that our growth will build up again after 26-27, but then every time there is a reset, it will be lost again and we'll start from scratch. The new distribution methodology in terms of funding reform will be made up of 3 elements: relative needs formula, an area cost adjustment, and importantly for us, it will take into account the ability of each council to raise council tax. But they will use an average figure there. So they will take an average of what they think councils should be able to raise through council tax, not what they actually are able to raise. So as a low council tax authority, that will be detrimental for us because they will assume we should be able to raise more council tax than we actually are. There will be a foundation formula within the relative needs formula, which covers both upper and lower tiers. So we will only get funding through that element of the formula, because then there will be bespoke formula for things like adults, children's and families and highways. They are also talking about removing a fixed cost element. So at the moment, regardless of what size council you get a fixed amount. So that protects councils that are smaller because they know that they're guaranteed that amount. Again, if they take that fixed cost out, it's detrimental to smaller councils such as ourselves. You can see the direction that this is going. So the more detailed consultation, which hopefully will include some figures, will follow after the spending review in late spring, which could be any time up until July. So transitional arrangements, they do talk about this in the consultation, and what they said is that the transitional arrangements will take into account the business rates reset and funding reform at the same time. At the moment, our MTFS only includes transitional protection on business rates reset because we don't have any information on the funding redistribution at the moment to be able to build anything in. The illustration in the consultation shows a blending in of the impact of business rights reset and funding reform. And the illustration shows that we would get 66% protection in 26-27, 33% in 27-28, and then the full impact would be seen in 28-29. That is less than we have currently built in. It also states that the protection would only be against any loss in the growth in business rates that we've had, not in our full business rates income, whereas at the moment we've assumed that the protection would look at our overall change in business rates income. However, the consultation does state that this is not the government's position, it's just an illustration. However, if it is indicative of the way that they're heading, and we know that they want to start directing more funding along to deprived areas, deprived councils as quickly as possible, it does mean significantly less transitional protection than we've currently factored into the MTFS. But as the consultation states at the moment, it's not the government's position. We don't have enough certainty to update the MTFS at this point in time. But what I did want to show you is what this would mean. So just to highlight, the important point here is that I believe this is the worst case scenario. So this slide sets out what it would look like. So it compares, if you look at the top line is what we've built into our draft MTFS, business rights income, including transitional protection. Second line is what it would look like under the consultation illustration, which is a bit of a tongue twister. So you can see there that at the end of the 3-year period from 25-26 to 27-28, the cumulative impact of that would be a reduction in our business rights income compared to our MTFS of 2.3 million. We have built-in growth from 27-28 that haven't shown on there because we are assuming that that will start to build up again from 27-28, but I just wanted to show you what it looks like without that growth in there at the moment. And just to highlight there, at the moment our MTFS assumes that we would lose roughly about 26% in business rights income between 25-26 and 27-28. if this scenario is what materialises, then we would actually be looking at a loss of 44% of our business rates income across the 3 years, which is really significant. So in terms of what that would look like, again, worst case scenario, we would be in a position where we wouldn't be able to maintain our general fund position above 1.5 million at the end of those 3 years. However, the important thing to focus on is our statutory duty at the moment is to make sure we have a balanced budget for 25-26, and we are able to approve that budget, and I have no concerns with that at the moment. I also have, not me personally, though, we also have other options and solutions for dealing with this if this was to materialise. As I mentioned at the beginning, it looks like for Q3, our business rates and our revenue monitoring position are improved, and we can update the MTFS for that, which will improve the position. We've recently been made aware that from 26-27, our pension fund contributions are likely to reduce significantly. Again, that would impact on this position as well. We've got a number of options that have been put forward to us on that at the moment, so I need to take that through the appropriate decision-making process before I can actually include that in the MTFS. We'll obviously respond to the consultation, and we can put forward our views on the transitional arrangements and what we think alternative ones should be. National insurance contributions at the moment, I've only built in the funding to cover those in the first year of the MTFS. Having spoken to a number of other 151 officers, they have actually built that in across the period of the MTFS. Again, that would improve the position. As we've mentioned, we've got a number of unring-fenced earmarked reserves. If we need to, then we would have to look at those and reallocate some of those. And lastly, as I've also mentioned, as a leadership team, we'll be looking at where there are cost reductions that can be made and alternative budget scenarios as well. So whilst I think this is the worst case scenario, I do think there are sufficient options there for us to be able to address it if this did materialise, and we'd still be able to maintain our minimum general fund reserves above the 5 million over the next 3 years. But I just wanted to highlight this to you because these consultation documents are starting to come through, and we're trying to work on them as quickly as we can. I just wanted to let you know the potential implications that we're aware of at the moment. So, on that cheery note, any questions?
Any questions? Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just feel that we've got sight of the worst case scenario, and that's what we want to know about. We want to know exactly how we'd stand if things went really wrong. And we do not know what's going to happen in the next few years with businesses talking about, slowing up or going somewhere else. So it's important to be watching that worst case scenario. And then we've got to time it so we've got nothing left when somebody takes over. Thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Allen.
Just want to compliment Rebecca because I'm very conscious this is like throwing dice at the moment. And really, to present us with these figures, you've done a tremendous job. Okay, thank you for that. I do think we need continued updates. That's going to be the next set of difficulties, isn't it? This is going to have to come back, perhaps even more regularly than ONS. I'm just wondering how we can organise those updates and which committee they're going to be attached to, because I don't think it's enough for just finance people to look at this. We've all got to be up to speed with what's currently happening. So some comment about that, please.
Thank you. Yes, through you, Chair. Yeah, absolutely happy to update as and when we can and when we've got more information, and happy to do that through all member briefings as we've done previously with other issues. So yeah, I'll get those in the diary, obviously, when we've got more to report on.
Councillor Steele?
Thank you, Chairman. I've left these two questions to the end because I don't know which section they apply to. So if our local plan is found to be not sound, then our house numbers are set to treble. So how would that affect the budget regarding new homes bonus? And how long would it take us? Net can probably answer, to get a new local plan in approximately. I know I'm asking because, well, that's the first question anyway.
Thank you to you, Chairman. Well, if the unthinkable was to happen and we didn't get this local plan through, on that assumption, we're probably looking starting, because we're starting the new local plan now in any case, with a view to hopefully having the existing local plan adopted by the end of the year. We would really be looking at a good probably 2 to 3 years as a minimum before we get that plan through. I know the government's expectations is needs to be a lot quicker, but realistically, I think we'd be looking at 2 to 3 years from now to have a new local plan.
Second question.
Chair, can I just,
Yeah.
just on the new homes bonus part of that question, it won't be continuing after 25, 26 anyway, so it won't have any impact on that funding stream.
And the second observation is there's a solar farm application coming up. No, well, there might be one next week, but in the next month or so in our area, and the developer has said there will be an increase in business rates of approximately £50,000 a year, 40 years. Now, there have been several solar farms in the last 12 months been approved. So where is the business rates income for those in the budget?
Chair, if those businesses are paying business rates, then they will be included in our business rates funding already. Obviously, if there's new ones to be approved, then they would be factored in once we were aware of them and once they were paying business rates. But obviously, I haven't got a breakdown of the individual businesses paying our business rates, but I can certainly check if there are any that you're expecting to be paying, and if you let me know, and I can always have a check to see whether that's coming in.
So just, I assume farmers pay business rates per acre on their arable land. Would that be the same as a potential solar, a business like a solar farm, or would there be a great increase for the solar farm?
Can I come back to you on that one, because it's a relatively new area? So if that's okay, I'll come back to you on that one.
Any further questions, members? Councillor Reid?
I'm pretty sure there isn't any business rates on agricultural land, and I hope there's not, because I haven't paid any for God knows how long.
Any further questions, members? No? Right then, thank you. Any further points, Rebecca? No. I will then go to point 8 of page 7. It's recommended that members scrutinise the proposal, in particular A, to support the report, B, to no to section 25 statement. C, to support the revised capital programme. D, to support the minimum level of general fund reserves. And E, members to note that the leader of the council to be authorised to make any necessary amendments to include the late information or correct any errors. Everybody in agreement on that? Thank you, members. I will now go to number agenda 5, which is the Staffordshire Residents Survey. Jackie Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. Very quick introduction to this item. My colleagues Kevin and Tom are going to take you through a presentation because I think it's really important that we bring out some of the results from the survey of 2024. As members know, we do an annual survey. Very pleasingly, we actually saw an increase again in the number of responses, but probably more importantly, we also saw again, looking at national trend, we saw an increase in terms of the percentage of residents is now at 95% who are likely or very likely to recommend South Staffordshire as a place to live, which again, as I say, is an increase. So rather than me going through any more detail, we thought it would be really good to share with you a presentation which brings out the report and some of these fantastic results.
Thank you for that introduction. So the report in front of you provides the headline results from 2024 residents survey. That's in section 3. Tom will provide you with some more details in his presentation in just a moment. The significant increase in response was very pleasing this year. So going from last year's response of just over 1,100 survey responses, we had over 1,600 this year, so in 2024. And all 5 localities are well represented in the response. And so we can produce results of the survey at locality level. The response really benefited from members and parishes helping us to promote the survey. It makes such a big difference because people will respond to a personal approach to encourage them to complete the survey, and that really helps. The survey was undertaken in-house, so that gave myself and Tom, we could see where the responses were coming from. We could step in and we could promote the survey in areas of the district perhaps where the response was relatively low, and we did that a few times. That allowed us to increase the response right across the whole district. In addition to that, we've put particular effort in this year into reaching younger adults, where the response in previous years has been particularly low. The schools, local schools, helped us to promote the survey to parents. We went into local leisure centres, so we promoted the survey to parents at swimming lessons or at football coaching sessions. We went into all the local railway stations during the commuter times, promoting the survey. And we did see an increase in the younger adult response this year, which was pleasing. And so we're pleased with that. And now I'll let Tom go through the details of the results.
Evening, members. I'll start off with just a few facts and figures and some learning that we kind of got from the resident survey. So the first figure I'd like to bring to your attention is that one there, 17,331. So that's how many impressions that we had on Facebook. So impressions is just anyone seeing the resident survey post. So that's a direct post or kind of on a story or any other way. So that's quite a large figure. That is a good amount of people that see our resident survey. It was a slight decrease on last year, but we still think that is a pretty good figure of who is seeing our posts on social media. However, what we are noticing and what we had this year was only 45 people actually clicked on the link from the social media posts that we as South Staffordshire Council were posting, which is not very many at all. And it's actually quite a big decrease from last year, which is 252. So what we found is when we as a council are posting things on social media, it doesn't necessarily get a huge response. But what we did notice is when parishes and members and our partners are posting them, that they get many more clicks than we do as a district council. So that's why it's so important as members when you are sharing it, because we're noticing such a big increase in responses from when you share compared to when we share. So the fact that we had an increase in response is a real testament to the work that you did in helping to promote the survey this year. 30 was the number of paper copies that we had back. That's a decrease on what we had last year. Generally, our paper copy responses are over 65 population, and you might think that perhaps we're not being represented well enough from that population if we're not getting the paper copies back. But as we'll show a little bit later on, actually, they were some of our best responders were over 65s, and that they are very digitally able. And then finally, just on some of the facts and figures about sharing the survey, something that we found this year as one of the key measures was we sent a direct email out to all people who are part of our Gov delivery. So that figure there was 773. Sorry, my presentation's having a bit of a moment. I'll get it back up in just a second. So we sent out a direct email to all our residents on our Gov delivery, which is something that is new that we've done. We haven't usually done that. Usually we just embed it in our news roundup. And what we found is by sending this direct email, which was particularly focused just on the resident survey, that we actually had a huge response just from that direct interaction with them. 773 people clicked on the direct one that we had. And I think in the first day that we sent it out, it was around 400 residents that clicked on that link. So we have learned some really key things with engaging with residents. Number one is, as a council, our social media maybe doesn't generate a great response, but your social media and the parishes and the partners really does. And then when we send very direct communications to the residents, they are far more likely to respond than perhaps when it's a little bit more embedded in other comms. So this is just a bit of an overview of the response. As we said, every single locality did have an increase in the response rate. I'm not going to go through all the figures in great detail there, but it's just worth noting that every single area had an increase in the number of responses. Although the percentage change might be a little bit less for some, that's mainly because locality 5 had a very, very big increase. Wombourne had a very good response this time and kind of to a little bit out of proportion, as you can say, they had a 29% increase from last year's responses, but every single locality had an increase and it was really, really pleasing to see. And because of that, we were able to get some very good locality data there. So we asked the question, what do you like about your village? And this is an open-ended question, and we have struggled in the past to get analysis from this, but we had a little bit of help from AI this year to help us to break that down. And they've come up with some key themes from that, and we've kind of gone through it and checked it. And the number one thing that gets brought up about what do you like about your village, and community spirit is number one. People, the way that they phrase it, they love their community. There's a great feel about it, friendly neighbours. And that was coming across in all of the areas. I think the example on there is an example of quite a few from Kimber residents who spoke about the many events that they have and the different groups that are going on in the community that allows them to feel part of that area. The second one was access to nature. You're going to see access to nature coming up quite a bit in this survey. It's something that is really, really important to our residents, and it is essential to them. They highlighted it in this question, and they highlight it a little bit later on. And this was throughout the district. Every single area highlighted the need that they have to be able to go on walks, to be able to see the lovely environments that we live in South Staffordshire Council. The third thing was the local amenities. And once again, this was something throughout. There was a little bit of a difference. Some of our bigger villages, for example, Cudsall there mentioned that they have quite a lot of amenities here, but even smaller of our villages were very keen to highlight the fact that they are glad that they are able to access a lot of key things in their area. And it's something that people are very, very happy about. And safety and low crime. There's some interesting things that will pop up a little bit later, but residents really enjoy that. They feel that they live in a very safe place, and you'll see later on that they do highlight that they feel very safe. But they are very pleased that the areas they live in are safe. And then just the last couple of things, the aesthetic appeal. Residents really highlighted that they enjoy when they live in a nice, clean, lovely village. Many of them highlighted the convenient location, that they're able to get to some of these bigger places nice and easy. And then they also highlighted the local events. They're really pleased with the events that parishes, the partners and the council are putting on in their communities. So that's just some of the key things that the residents highlighted to us about what they like about their village. I think really all fantastic things that they have highlighted to us. Here's just a bit of a word cloud that picks out some of the key things that residents said. Sorry, it's a little bit blurry. But as you can see, friendly, village and community really stand out there. And I think that's such a testament to the work that is going on up and down, that people feel that they live in a very friendly community. So as Jackie had mentioned, how likely are you to recommend South Staffordshire as a place to live? We did see a fantastic response to that this year, with 95% of residents recommending as a place to live, 6% higher than last year. And in fact, we saw that increase throughout the district, with every single locality seeing an increase in recommending as a place to live. Some real big ones there, locality 3 with a 9% increase from last year, and even locality 2, which 97% of the residents who completed this survey would recommend as a place to live. I think is a fantastic testament once again to the work that we everyone has been doing to in South Staffordshire. So we asked the question, we asked two questions. What is most important in making South Staffordshire a good place to live? And then we also asked them, do any of the following cause you concern in your village? We've put these together for you today. We give them a list of options, and then they essentially select their top 3 options. And what we've got here is kind of the district and the locality's top 3. Now, these here on the district are pretty common throughout. In fact, they're pretty much the same responses for every single locality. I will just pick out a few of the differences. It's no surprise that access to nature is the most important thing in making South Staffordshire a good place to live. That has been the #1 option for the last couple of years that we've been doing resident surveys, and it is considerably higher than the next choice. We also had obviously village centre, shopping facilities and low crime rates is what makes it very important. Some of our biggest concerns were particularly around kind of traffic and transport. And then the third biggest concern is crime. Obviously, they recognise it as a very important thing in making it a good place to live, but it is still obviously a concern of our residents. You will notice that for locality 1, it was essentially the exact same as the district. However, when we move on to locality 2, there are a couple differences that we'll be able to pick out. The third choice for most important was healthcare facilities. They were the only locality that put that down. It's the first time that has popped up, so we are doing a little bit more research into perhaps why that has come up in locality 2 as one of their biggest things to make an important place to live. But they were also the only ones that put public transport as the biggest concern in their village. What I will add, just a bit of context to that, is when the survey was taking place, they had just taken away a bus route in locality 2, and there's a good chance that might have impacted possibly the results at that time, as it was quite a hot topic for residents in locality 2 at that time. But it is still a concern, and something that we are keen to look into further. Locality 3 were the only locality that put clean streets as what most important. As what is most important in making South Staffordshire a good place to live. Just another highlight that residents do care about the feel and the look of where they are. Locality 4, once again, very similar to the rest of the district. And then locality 5, which had fly tipping there as its third biggest concern. And that has been something that's been highlighted in locality 5 now for a little while. What I will point out is fly tipping was essentially the 4th choice for nearly all other localities. So although it wasn't in the top 3, it obviously still is a big concern to residents. And it is worth just noting that there today. So we asked a new question today. We asked, how often do you visit your village centre? You can take a break from listening to me and you can watch a lovely video about what the village centres kind of look like. But we did ask how often they visit them, and this piece of work that we've done is going to be going into a larger piece of work, and this information has been passed on to the relevant team. But there's some really interesting results. So every day the district was around 19%, but locality 2 was considerably higher, at about 30% of the respondents saying that they visit their village centre every single day. The majority of those responses were from Brood and Coven. Every other day, the district was about 19%. Locality 4 was the highest there at 28%. And you'll notice locality 3 was quite a bit lower at 9%. And that's a little bit of a trend with the next couple ones coming up. So once or twice a week, locality 4, once again, was the highest. Once or twice a month, the district was pretty consistent at about 4% in all localities. And then only when I need to, district was about 13%, but locality 3 was considerably higher than any others at about 24%. And then also locality 3 was the highest at never. I do think it is worth noting with locality 3 of where it is located, that they have a little bit easier access to some of the bigger shopping areas. So it's very fair, I think, to assume that they might travel out a little bit more to some of their shopping needs, but some really interesting results and gives a really good insight to some of the activities of our residents. So we're doing a little bit further breakdown on that, on the people that answered these questions and kind of some of their shopping habits and what that means for us as a district. So one of the questions that we always ask, how safe do you feel in your area? And I know this is a really, really important question and topic. So we asked the question, how safe do you feel in your area during the day and night? This question, we follow the national way of asking this question. So when we ask it, there are 5 options, which are feel very safe, feel somewhat safe, neither safe nor unsafe, somewhat unsafe, and very unsafe. For the purposes of kind of presenting, we've mixed the safe ones together and the unsafe ones there. But some really, really exciting news was that every single locality, and in fact the district, saw an increase in feeling safe in the district. So if you want your kind of 2 really key headlines from this resident survey, is residents are feeling happy with where they live and they're feeling safe with where they live. Some really, really promising things there. We also saw a decrease in the neither safe nor unsafe. Now, to us, that sometimes can be a bit of an annoyance when we ask this question, because a lot of people will just kind of put it in the middle and you kind of want to know safe or unsafe. But we're actually really pleased to say that a lot of that figure in itself saw a decrease, and a lot of those were moving to the feeling safe. We also saw a decrease in the obviously somewhat feeling unsafe and very unsafe in every area, bar locality 3, which saw a huge increase from 3% to 4%. It's nothing particularly to worry about. It was just a bit of a, it's kind of what happens when people don't put the neither safe nor unsafe. It kind of filters either to the very safe or unsafe. So very positive news there. And once again, very positive news there for the night. We once again saw an increase in the district and every single locality in how safe they feel at the night. Now, you'll notice those figures are lower than the day. That is to be expected, but there are some really, really high figures there. How safe the residents feel was higher than the national average for both day and night. Just to highlight some really big changes, we saw a 10% increase in locality 1 feeling safer at night, and locality 2 we saw a 16% increase in feeling safer at night. We did see a decrease in feeling unsafe. There was a slight increase in locality 4, which went from 10 to 11%. That's a very small change and nothing particularly to be alarmed about. Just a quick word cloud on what that means. You'll see the word lack, and I'll show you why that comes so prevalent in a second. Because when we once again ask the question, we ask the question to those of you that put you, those who put I feel unsafe, we ask them why they feel unsafe. And once again, we've done a breakdown of those reasons. So these are kind of the 6 key reasons that people have put. So lack of police, which is why the word lack came so big in that word cloud. Lack of police was kind of the #1 reason of why people were feeling unsafe in their area. They highlighted 3 kind of very particular crimes around car theft and burglaries, drug dealing and youth behaviour. And they also pointed out poor lighting as one of the reasons that residents feel unsafe. The other couple of reasons were traffic related issues, and obviously that was highlighted to us earlier on as one of the biggest concerns. Environmental factors, we've put it down as environmental factors, but what they're actually highlighting was overgrown hedges, shrubbery. So when things start to look not very neat or tidy, it starts to concern the residents, and also lack of CCTV. So that also contributed to the big lack and the word cloud there. So they were kind of the 6 main things that residents picked out. Now, I will point out that because not many residents put that they felt unsafe, we're only looking at a couple hundred people who actually contributed to this one here, whereas the first question, how what do you like about your village, had about 1,400 people writing it down there. So just to make you aware of that. So we asked the question for the first time, how do you find out about council information? And there were some interesting results there. So word of mouth was pretty consistent in all the localities, and it's quite a common way of obviously word getting around of council information. Council text, emails and e-newsletters was at about 27%, so one of our higher ones. That's not too much of a surprise because obviously those who responded to this, a good portion of them did get this from the e-newsletter which we send out, but it's good to know that we have a lot of people who are signed up to our emails and e-newsletters, so it's good to see that figure coming in quite high there. Social media, no surprise, as one of our highest. You will notice that locality one is a little bit less than kind of what the district average is. We have struggled with locality one sometimes to get onto their social media pages and just having that information shared. It is something that we are aware of, so that figure isn't too much of a shock, but obviously we are aware of the good work that the parish and the councillors do in sharing that in locality one. Direct contact with the council, locality 4 is the highest, but that's no real shock there, as obviously the community hub is based in locality 4. Printed information provided by the council. Obviously, this is not as high as it probably would have been in previous years, as we are moving to a bit more of a digital way of sharing information. But interesting that it's still around 20%, around 16% of the district that still get that information through paper copies. The council website was our highest way of people receiving information at about 45%. At the district, and every single locality being above 40%. There is a lot of work going on into our website to make sure that our pages are up to date and that the information is relevant. And as this is one of probably the key ways that people find about the information, it's obviously upon us to make sure that we are keeping that information easy and accessible for our residents. Council magazine, obviously, this only goes out now twice a year and it is done online, so it's no real surprise that it's not one of our biggest responders at only 10% at the district. I imagine in previous years it probably would have been a little bit higher, but not one of our highest currently. Local media, so that might be local media outlets such as like the Express and Star and things such as that, only around 12%, so not a huge percentage of how people find out about their information. Local council was a little bit lower than actually what we expected it to be honest. We think it might be down to the fact that you share a lot of it on social media, and we think that they probably are receiving information from you just on social media and they're not thinking of it as direct conversations with you. It is something that we're a little bit surprised about, and we are keen to do a little bit more work into this to kind of figure out obviously how people do receive their information. And then just finally, about 9% of the people who filled in the survey were unaware of how they get their information. So I'm not quite sure how that works, but just a bit of a quirk there in the results. And then just finally, kind of who is filling out our surveys. So we did ask the question, to what extent do you agree or disagree that your local area is a place where people from different backgrounds get along together? We saw a very, very high agree to this, which is, you know, no surprise when residents are telling us that they're very happy in their communities. It was quite a long question, so we do possibly wonder if maybe people just looked at the last little bit about whether you get along in your area, but a really, really positive response, another testament to the way that people are feeling very happy with where they live. When it comes to the gender breakdown of those who were completing our survey, it's no real surprise that we have a high percentage of females who do complete the survey. That kind of represents our social media following, to which we do have a high percentage of females that follow us on social media. Although we did see a big increase in locality 3, that saw a jump from 27% to 41% of males responding. So the males are pulling it back a little bit in a couple areas. Do you have any long-term conditions or illness that reduce your ability to carry out day-to-day activities without support? This is the first time that we've asked this question. Now, it is worth just noting that this we don't ask for people to provide any evidence. So they are obviously just answering this on themselves. It was a little bit higher than what was brought back in the 21 census. Nothing completely kind of egregious to worry about. Just a couple of areas that were a little bit higher, like locality 2 and locality 3 were a little bit higher than probably the census suggested at that time. What age group do you belong to? So as we did mention at the start, that we did see an increase in the under 35 population. You're not going to see it there because obviously we've broken it down as a percentage. But there is actually a very big increase that we saw from the amount that responded last year, which was really, really promising. In fact, they're pretty similar to what the census population breakdown suggested. No surprise that the 55 to 74 age range was our biggest responders. That is a big portion of our population and also our largest social media following. But what you will see, and which was really, really promising, is that 75 plus age increase from 9% last year to 19% of responses this year. A really, really promising increase. It kind of just showed that our over 75 population, that they are online and that they are digitally active and they are able to respond to things digitally. So really, really good response rate from our plus 75s there. And then what is your ethnic group? Very much, very similar to what the census suggested. So very, very similar there, obviously, with white being our biggest response rate. Now, just finally for you members, something new that we did this year is, as we have asked that question previously, would you like to be involved in community engagement events? However, this year we gave them the option to actually put the specific things that they would like to be involved with. And we had a really good response. We had about 600 email addresses that were given to us to be able to contact for community engagement events. Some of the highest ones there were around open spaces, where nearly 300 people were willing to be involved and engaged, and waste and recycling, over 250. The options were kind of for all our services. Every single service had at least one person who was willing to be engaged. So really, really promising for us going forward. We'll be using these residents and getting in contact with them when it comes to public consultation and obviously consulting around some of our different services. So that was a bit of good news for us as a council, the willingness of our residents to get involved with the work that we do. That's all from me. Let's share my screen.
Any questions, members? Councillor Brinkley first.
Thank you, John. I deal with a lot of facts and figures, and all the way through tonight, you've spoken in percentages, which I'm keen on. I can understand it very well. But when you said you got 1,600 responses, what percentage of that is from, or what? How many people have we got in South Staffordshire now? Is it 80 odd thousand? So what percentage is your 1.6 over your 80,000?
So it's around 110,000 is the population. So yes, 1.6 isn't what you would say absolutely, fantastic result. But actually, when you compare to other resident surveys and other councils, it's pretty consistent with what other councils get up and down the country. And I think what we're quite fortunate with is the percentage, well, the people who responded give a fair representation of kind of what the census was telling us of what the makeup is of our district. So even though it's maybe not the highest figure in the world compared to 110,000, it does give a fairly good representation of the residents.
Councillor Harper-Willis.
Thank you, Chair. Was there a question where we asked the residents if they knew what services our council was responsible for?
There wasn't in this survey here. This was particularly kind of about more place-based one about how they feel about living in South Staffordshire.
Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got 3 points to raise. The first one is more a comment. I just want to say how good it is and positive that there's been an increase in the 25 to 34 age range. And I made these comments last year. We had a panel on community engagement. One of the key objectives of the panel was getting younger people more engaged with the council generally and the resident survey in particular due to low response. So some of the suggestions that were put forward, like attending community activities where that age group would attend and getting the response up is very positive on that. Secondly, again, with the CCTV point that you mentioned, take the opportunity here. We had an information fair in Purton Library yesterday, and the local PCSOs had a table, and the PCSOs was fed back to the parish council, and it was reported to the parish council last night, Purton Parish Council, that a lot of residents had told the PCSOs that they were very concerned about CCTV. They were saying that they did want more CCTV on that. And my third and final question is, have you got a breakdown of the individual wards for those stats? Because that would be very interesting to have. Thank you.
We do have the breakdown. We've done it. Obviously, the question was what village do you live in? So we particularly have it down to a parish level. Obviously, we could put those parishes into the ward. It is just worth noting, obviously, some parishes would have had villages would have had a much bigger response than others. So some of those smaller ones, obviously, the figures are not going to be particularly high. So it's a bit harder to get something out of it. But obviously, that information is available. And if you have any questions or any further information, please just drop us an email or come speak to us. We're more than happy to provide that kind of for you.
Councillor Allen?
Just briefly, first a comment about the presentation itself. Some of the text is quite obscured by the activity behind it. So if you could possibly panel some of that information inside the video, that would be great. Thank you. It would be good if we all had a copy of this as a presentation, please. Most of us have got the ability now to show presentations to our councils. And I think our members will be quite interested to see the level of participation by younger people. Just following up what Chris has just said about our own parish, the level of anxiety about crime seems to vary quite a lot at different times. And I think it very much reflects the patterns of burglaries and thefts from shops and other things that people are witnessing or hearing about on social media. I'm pleased to see that some of these perceptions have actually improved and people are rating this as a low crime area, which we have understood, but we see all the statistics and it's a good thing for all our parishes really to see some of these statistics. So even if we're just editing out, what we can do and show to our parish councils, it would be really useful for everyone to see that comparison about it being a safer area than they think it is. Thank you.
Councillor Harper Willis, you want to come back?
Yeah, just an observation around I noticed. So one of the stats that stood out for me was that 29% of people in locality 1, Penkridge, surrounding areas, don't feel safe at night. That's nearly 1 in 3, which is an incredible statement, really. I know that we're 2 out of 3 felt safe, but for at least one person out of 3 to not feel safe in their village is a bit worrying to me. Do we share these results with our partners, the county, and the police as well? Because I think that's a worrying trend, if I'm honest.
So yes, the information does obviously get shared. Obviously, many of you know Maggie, and she takes that further aboard. I think a bit of confusion. It was 9% somewhat unsafe for locality 1 at night. Sorry, I thought you said 29%. Sorry. Oh, sorry.
I added the 10% back, the people that didn't say they felt safe. So, yeah.
No, that's fine. Yeah, obviously it does get passed on to Maggie and she deals with that information. She has it currently and she will feed that back further in.
Any further question, councillor Reid, then councillor Kingsley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I just feel that when we were looking at the villages, and especially the larger villages, where how many people go into the village, that doesn't really represent all the villages. I mean, there's a lot of villages, but unfortunately, they've lost the post office. They've lost, that sort of hub of attraction. And I didn't think that really represented the whole picture. I just want to touch on the other thing that I've noticed about hedge cutting. The government now, or DEFRA, prefer us, or don't prefer us, they tell us that we can't cut hedges until the end of August. That's to protect the wildlife, which we all want to do anyway. But then that clashes with another important job in the agricultural calendar. It's called harvesting. So they're not going to go hedge cutting when they shouldn't be cutting that corn. And this causes a lot of people to start complaining. And then when you do cut it, the attitude of people have got no time whatsoever for you. And if they say, you ought to sweep it up, there's no way I'm going to stand in a road and get run over by impatient motorists. You can't win. I just thought to mention that because I picked it up.
I will just quickly add in about the visiting village centres. I probably should mention on there, there was a not applicable option. Obviously for some of those villages that do not have that option. I will include it kind of at the bottom when we send it out, just so you can see the percentage of people that did put not applicable for that option, because obviously not every village is able to answer that question.
Could I also suggest that they ever attended a parish council meeting? Because the only people that seem to attend is the planning application, and they're all, worried about that. You don't see them coming in to get a feel of the village. And I'm sorry to say that in the smaller villages, it's very, very difficult now. So you've got a computer population that are coming in, getting home. They don't want to know anything else, only get to television. So the community in the villages, especially the small, is a very difficult thing in town. And interesting. Okay.
Councillor Kingsley.
Thank you, Chairman. And Tom, great report. Looks good. Actually, completely support all the figures that you've got in there. It broadly chimes with the conversations I have with residents on a regular basis, the issues they raise, what they like about the area, and what they're concerned about, that kind of thing. So I think it must be absolutely spot on. In terms of how we engage with residents, and perhaps in particular younger residents and older residents, 75 plus, can be tricky. Now you've mentioned that there's a strong response from the 75 plus, digitally. People are online, they can access, but a lot of people still can't. So how we can do any of this better. So for a start, I mean, on a Friday, I regularly attend a community cafe, a friendship group in Womben. There are regularly 45, 50, 55 residents there that match broadly that profile. I'm forever writing things down for residents there, sort of like tips on who to go to, sort of like contact this person, or here are my details, get in touch with me and we'll make a point, whatever. Because they're not digitally savvy, or they don't really want to go down that route, is there an opportunity for identifying groups such as that exist in our communities, and doing a little bit of a roadshow, and making of South Staffs Council are going to turn up and actually consult us today and make a bit of a thing of it. Likewise, is there something else we can do? I mean, I'm always a big fan of a QR code. Actually, whether you can put something, really simple as, South Staff's resident survey on, a little disc that you can distribute around cafes. You could even have them printed on beer mats, for instance, and go around the pubs. You might get wider responses to that. Just a thought, everybody.
Thank you, Jackie.
Thanks, Councillor Kinsey. I think one of the things that we've sort of said over the next 12 months, particularly community engagement, continues to be a primary focus for us. And again, as Councillor Evans referred to, the group that looked at it last year, we already do a significant number of on-site events where we're out in the community, and we do take that opportunity to seek feedback. So I think for me, it's a whole range of areas that we will look at. And certainly, again, it's where members particularly benefit in the fact that if you know of those groups and there is that interest in us attending, we will look to actually come out and do those roadshows. But I think actually when you look at some of the statistics over the year, we're actually out in the community quite a significant amount already, and it's about where it has to add value, because there has to be that balance between providing the services and actually being out there. But certainly community engagement becomes a focus even more so over the next 12 months.
Thank you, Jackie. Can I just ask, do we go into the schools?
We certainly seek, particularly around careers and development, and certainly the climate change agenda is very much the schools. So we have, we do try to broker with the schools' engagement as much as we possibly can, and they certainly form part of the partnership. Not every school we go into, but yes, certainly we do engage with schools.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Brindley.
Brindle, Chairman. Since I've had this, which is about 30 years now, since I've been a councillor again recently, I've never been asked, Tom, to share any information. I'm on the police one, so I send Amber Alerts out and I share it out. But since I've never had one on there off the district council to share in the last 2 years. So when you say get to grassroots, if you send it to me, I can send it to another 1,000 people easily. I don't know if you've sent anything out, but I've never had nothing. Email.
We don't do text messages. What we will do is weekly, we do the roundup news, and included in that, and that's where a lot of members pick up that information and share it off that. So that tends to be the route in terms of us providing information that members are more than welcome to share. And I know we do see a number of members using that. It's the parish version that is useful to use.
Councillor Adams.
Sorry, that was loud, wasn't it? I find the best way. I follow South Staffordshire Council on Facebook. So if you follow them, regular posts come up, and then you can just forward that onto your Facebook. No, we don't get it directly, but if you follow that, sort of, I won't say every day, but it does come up quite frequently, and you can share that onto your Facebook, and then you can share it onto the groups that you belong to. So I find that quite helpful.
Okay, any further questions from members?
Actually, while I'm just on,
Sorry.
Following our community engagement challenge panel last year, it's quite obvious that you followed some suggestions, isn't it? Particularly with the younger people. So I think it's just a question of, keeping on doing the same, really. But also, we have a lot of people in our community cafe every week, as you know. And I think last year we had quite a few responses from them. This year they were saying, we've done this not long ago, why do you want it again? So it seemed to be, it didn't seem like 12 months before, it just seemed like, a few weeks. So some of them thought, I've done it 2 minutes ago, I'm not going to do it again. But,
Thank you. Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. I sat as chair of the working group where we were trying to get better information out to our residents. Jackie, one of the things that we discussed was whether we could actually put in a leaflet or a questionnaire in with the rates bill in the decision. Maybe the timing's not, because they may have a rise in the rates, but nonetheless, was there a legal reason why that couldn't be done going forward?
We can include supplementaries within the council tax communications. I think the challenge for us is the fact that the timing of the year is the fact that those bills will only be going out, obviously, once council has determined and set the council tax. So we haven't done it for this year, but we can absolutely include information within that, which we will, if appropriate.
I might come back to you, Jackie, then, yeah. I think that will get a significant increase because people, they may be really upset about various things, but at least we're going to get a feedback. It may not what we want, but it will be a truly representative, I think, a significant increase. I know we put the QR codes on, which is great. And I'm just wondering that everybody assumes, everybody knows, probably most of us in this room know how to go with that phone, look at it, a QR code, dab on it, and then we get into it. But bearing in mind that we have got an ageing population in South Staffordshire, it's how we make it as simple and as easy for them to communicate with us so that we can get their messages. And I know we have seen an improvement, so thank you very much for that.
Thank you, members. I'm now going to the recommendation of 8.1 on page 44. The recommendation is to members to know the contents of the report and will share any findings with the report and staff and partners. Everybody in agreement? Thank you, members. We'll now go to agenda item 6, which is the food caddy waste procurement. Mike?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just waiting for the Rachel and Mark to join me. Okay. Right, well, good evening, members. Tonight I'm bringing forward a proposed key decision for scrutiny in relation to the Council's procurement of food waste caddies. As members will be aware, officers are now working through the procurement of the Council's next waste and recycling contract, which will commence from the 1st of April 2026. The tender for this contract is due to close at the end of January, and Mark and Rachel will ensure members are fully briefed once the tender process has been completed. From the commencement of the new collection contract, all councils in England will be mandatory to collect food waste on a weekly basis. The council will therefore be required to procure and provide the necessary containers to residents to remain compliant with this new legislative requirement. All residents across South Staffordshire will be provided with an internal and external caddy for their food waste. And liners will also be provided on an ongoing basis. This, of course, subject to the disposal outlet accepting bagged food waste. Council has received New Bern's capital funding for the purchase of the required food waste caddies, and we have the option of procuring the caddies independently or as a collective with other Staffordshire authorities by the Staffordshire Waste Partnership. Before I outline my proposed key decision, I will now hand over to Rachel, Team Manager for Waste Management and Customer Support, to take you through the background of the report circulated to all members in advance of this evening's overview and scrutiny.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. I'm just trying to get the presentation up. It's not playing ball with me. So from a very fancy presentation to no presentation at all. We'll see if it gets going while I'm talking. Thanks, Lorraine. I'll get going anyway. So this report is to consider the method of procuring the food waste caddies. So as you'll be aware, from the 1st of April 2026, we have to provide a food waste collection service. Brilliant, thanks, Lorraine. We're mandated to do that by government. We've received capital funding from DEFRA for the purchase of the caddies. That includes the internal container households will have, the external container that we'll collect the rubbish from, and that also covers individual households as well as the flats and communal properties. The liners that will be used for residents to put the food into the bins are not going to be funded by government, but we know from the experience of others that they support residents in using the service. So that's something we've agreed that we will be providing, subject to the disposal point accepting them. So we've got two procurement options. One is that South Staffordshire Council conducts a solo procurement exercise, and the other is that we jointly procure the caddies with other Staffordshire councils as part of a RAP supported project. So what we're recommending is that we do the joint procurement. What we benefit from is the RAP expertise, which is free of charge for the Staffordshire Waste Partnership. We've got the Staffordshire Waste Partnership who would project manage that project. Lichfield Council have offered to be the lead contracting authority, again free of charge to us. There'll be collaboration with the relevant Staffordshire authorities. That'll be developing the specification together, the evaluation criteria together, and also ordering and reviewing samples of the caddies. We should be able to achieve economies of scale through that rather than doing a smaller order on our own, which hopefully gives us a more competitive edge with the suppliers. And it also means we can go out to order really early. So we'd be looking to go to the market in the middle of February for these. What we know is there's going to be really limited manufacturing capacity nationally, as every council in the country is going to be trying to order these containers. And we want to make sure we've got the best chance of getting them in ready to start that service on the 1st of April. What we're also doing is making sure we've got agreement as a collective on that specification and the evaluation panel, and we'll have an inter-authority agreement in place to make sure we all work well together and we govern those working arrangements and protect the interest of all the councils involved in that procurement exercise. The alternative approach is we do it on our own, which is achievable. It is possible for us to do it, but we just lose that external support and that expertise from those other councils and from RAP as well. It would delay our start to going out to the market because obviously, as you know, our waste collection contract is out of the market and due back in a couple of weeks' time. So we won't be able to start this procurement until we finish that one. And we may have that risk of not achieving the same economies of scale. However, on the flip side, we would then have complete autonomy over the specification and evaluation if we did it solo. So just to touch on the financial considerations, as I've said, we've received new burdens funding already for the purchase of the caddies. Getting some initial quotes from companies, the funding we've received for the external caddies seems about right. The internal caddy funding might be a little bit short. Obviously, the market's responding to that massive surge in demand. We won't know the actual prices until we go out to them. And as I've said, there's no funding for liners. But what we have got within the current capital programme and incorporated in the MTFS is funding for waste containers, and there's sufficient funding within that budget should the costs be higher than the new burdens funding allocation when those bids come in. So we don't have any funding concerns in relation to the purchase of those containers. A few other considerations and risks, again, as I've mentioned, manufacturing capacity and the timeliness of getting the order in. The flats and communal properties, what we've decided at this point is we won't start a procurement of the external caddies for the flats. As we've previously discussed with members, we want to do some scoping exercises at each individual property to work out what the best solution is for those communal properties. So we will pick that element up at a later date. The food waste disposal point and whether they accept the liners is something we'd have to confirm because the county council are currently in the process of procuring the disposal point. So whilst we will proceed with purchasing them, that will be subject to securing a disposal point that and whether they can accept them or not. There's a storage consideration once we receive the containers. We're hoping to receive them in advance of the 1st of April, which means we need somewhere to keep them all until we're ready to roll them out to residents. And as you can imagine, there'll be quite a fair few of those to find a home for. So that's some of the piece of work we'll be looking at. We'll be using a reputable framework to do the procurement as well. So we're looking at ESPO, YPO, who are currently putting together a brand new framework with a combination of big suppliers and some local suppliers as well. So we've got a good mix of competition for that tender. We're also building in a mechanism to review the bidders' samples as part of the evaluation criteria. So we get some actual examples of what those containers will look and feel like to review as part of assessing the bidders' bids. And we'll be developing a really robust specification for those containers as well. And we'll be using the resident feedback, the members' feedback, everything we sort of worked through over the summer as part of developing that specification. So in summary, we have to procure the caddies. We've received funding from government and we've got some capital funding available in case there is a shortfall. The two methods of procurement available to us are that solo procurement or the joint procurement with the other Staffordshire authorities. And at that point, I'll hand back to you, Councillor Davis. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel, for taking us through the background. Members, I will now set out my proposed key decision. My recommendation is for South Staffordshire Council to participate in a joint procurement of food waste caddies alongside other Staffordshire councils. Members, in considering this proposal, I will listen to your views, suggestions and recommendations before I issue my final decision on this matter. I now pass back to the chairman to open for any questions.
Any questions? Councillor Samar-Williston.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a few questions. On the combined one, as far as I understand, tenders have kind of like a weighted scoring. So like you'll have some specifications and things that people can meet, but then there's actually like a scoring and a percentage of that scoring goes towards cost and other things like environmental impact, things like that. So for the combined tender, what control do we have on the weighting of scoring? Given we've just had a report about our financial situation and potentially bad impacts, we'd want that scoring to be quite high for cost. So what control do we have over that? The other thing is doing it ourselves might actually open, something we may have missed is might open up for smaller SMEs to fulfill our order at a competitive price, with those businesses not being able to potentially fulfill a larger order in a combined tender. We might be, if we do it ourselves, might open ourselves up to those and there might be a cost saving there. So I guess my overall question is, can we do both, or could we do a hybrid version where we do an expression of interest for our own and then go and see what we can get from the combined? I don't know if there's we have to go with someone in an attended process. And then finally, just a comment on storage. We looked at our empty units in Fort Ashes for the storage potentially of those. I don't know if they're big enough, but yeah, thank you. Sorry, a lot of stuff there.
I'll try and remember them all. So the weighting query, we've had some initial discussion with the other Staffordshire councils. It will be subject to mutual agreement. We weight towards price primarily, always. But we have discussed that, you know, we still want that quality element to be up there. We want to make sure those caddies are suitable for residents to use. Last thing we want is a poorly made caddy that will put people off using them right away. So usually we go around either 70-30 or 60-40 towards price. That's typically what we look at. And I'm sure that once we finish those discussions, it will end up somewhere around there again. Storage wise, we are talking to the commercial assets team to look at what we've got ourselves already that might be suitable for storage. All the other authorities in Staffordshire are also looking at storage. There might be something we can do there around joint storage. But additionally, RAP are also happy to support with looking at alternative options should there not be anything viable we already have. Apologies, you have to remind me of the other questions. Sorry, Councillor Harper. Local SMEs. So the YPO framework that we started to look at is a brand new framework specifically for waste containers. They've got a mix of big companies that specialise in this and a number of newer, smaller companies being listed on that framework, which at the moment is the reason why we're leaning towards using that one. There's some companies on there that are based in Stone and around other areas of Staffordshire, that some of the other authorities have started getting samples from as well to check those products still meet the quality criteria. So I think that would give us the best mix of different sizes of business, and as long as they meet that criteria, they've still got that opportunity to win that work as well. And the fourth question, forgive me.
So yeah, just to follow, I've got follow-ups on your questions anyway, but the other one was why can't we do both? Just to mention on the frameworks then, so people have to be on a supplier framework for the combined thing. So again, just with my experience in public sector, sometimes that's like a gate for other smaller businesses that could potentially be competitive, but there are rules around framework and red tape that people have to get through. So again, going back to my point around if we did it ourselves, then maybe we could open up the level of entry for smaller businesses and maybe get a price. So I guess going back to that question, why can't we potentially consider both?
We can't run two procurement exercises at the same time. So we'd have to choose which path we want to go down. The procurement regulations wouldn't allow us to start approaching the market from both angles.
Is that like a legal, like, okay, so our hands are tied there anyway.
Yeah, so we need to pick that approach first. We can get quotes, indicative quotes from different companies. And what we can also do, because that YPO framework is being set up at the moment and not all the companies are listed on it, if we're aware of smaller companies that might be interested in being on that framework, we could signpost them to that framework to make sure that they're making themselves available on that, ready for when we do go to the market as well.
Sorry, Joe, just my last follow-up question on the bit about quality and the weighting. I think quality potentially should be part of the specifications, like you have to get this quality, and then that would probably enable you to do more of a weighting in price. So if you just have set in stone where we want our quality to be, and then we just get a better deal, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we'll use there are British standards for containers. So we'll make sure that we document all the British standards, all the other requirements that those containers definitely have to meet. There'll be certain things within the evaluation criteria that are pass-fail questions. If they don't adhere to certain standards or certain requirements, they won't be able to proceed any further. And then what we do is we have some, as you said, percentage scored questions in there as well, that where those sort of grayer areas are, where companies can distinguish themselves from each other, that will pick up the pricing and the quality elements in more detail. So we usually have that combination of questions that kind of gives us the best of both of those elements.
Thank you. Councillor Burnett, please, then.
Thank you,
Councillor
Chair.
Allen, then Reid.
Question for Rachel. It's not about the procurement, but the rollout. If you have residents who want to opt out of receiving one or both caddies because they've already got, say, their own home set up for composting, is that going to be a possibility, or is it a case of it gets rolled out to everybody and some will use it and some won't? Thank you.
So our understanding of our mandated requirements is we have to provide the service to all residents. I know some councils are playing with the idea of doing it as an opt-in, opt-out expression of interest, but I think from an administrative perspective that could get quite complicated. So our approach is going to be roll it out to everybody. If they choose not to use it for any reason, that's absolutely fine. We'll encourage people to use it. If they wanted to return the container, I'm sure we could find a way, or they might find their own use for it for something else at home. But to make sure we've covered our legal requirements, we'd roll it out to everybody.
Can I come back on that, Chair? I'm just wondering whether residents will be left with a load of plastic that, like other plastic, is just not going to be used and it increases the waste mountain, that's all. But I'll take your point. Thank you.
But we can look at a method of maybe collecting back in ones that don't want them afterwards. We can have a play with that to see what that would look like.
Councillor Robert Reid.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just think that the proposal from the cabinet member is the right one, is the joint one. I think that's power in purchasing. And I also think that with Rachel's comments on the standard of the bins, etc., have got to come up to that specification. That makes sure that we're going to get the right price and the right sort of quality of work to for the usability of them as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Robert Duncan first, then.
Okay. My question is, with regards to the joint option, do we lose any of our sort of negotiating rights? Do we go lower down in the pecking order, or is it on an equal footing?
It is on an equal footing. If we do encounter an issue where all parties can't agree, there's a dispute resolution process built into the inter-authority agreement with an escalation process as well in it, so we can try and come to an agreement. And there are also opt-out clauses to allow us to withdraw if, you know, we cannot come to an agreement. So there's sufficient protection in there for us if there is something that was we can't agree on.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Allen?
Thank you. Just a comment about, I'm fully in favour, by the way, of a joint project. I think that's economies of scale and it makes a lot of financial sense, as well as legitimising the design. Just a comment about the external bin. Please make sure it's a suitable, tough material. There are 3 foxes in the field behind my house and 2 of them were now road sniffing round our back door last night. So I have to say to you, it needs a secure clip. And that is one of the points of weakness in a lot of these designs. And I'm saying that having looked at my daughters in Wales.
Thank you.
Councillor Adams?
Thank you, Chair. Rachel, first of all, you and I have spoken over the telephone on this, on the Zoom thing. Thank you very much for everybody that's put in an awful lot of effort into bringing this to us as councillors. We're almost at the final hurdle. Just a quick question is, Mike mentioned that there were businesses up in Stone, and we're talking about them being made in England. Is that a priority of ours for us? Obviously, there's the 40-60 price range that we want to be in, but is it possible wherever to try and procure these? And I'm assuming that they are being manufactured in Stone and then being sold on to us, not imported into Stone and then sold to us.
I'm not sure on the specifics of the site that's in Stone. There is a lot of manufacturing capacity in the UK for containers. So all the containers we currently purchase are all manufactured in the UK. There's a lot of big suppliers that manufacture in the UK. I suppose what we need to be conscious of is there is not enough manufacturing capacity in the UK for every council to have their containers on time. So from the companies we've seen listed on the framework at the moment, a lot of them are. And my expectation would be that we probably would end up with a UK-based manufacturer for them. But we'll have those sufficient protections of the standards and the quality requirements and everything else in there, as well as them needing to provide samples to us to review beforehand, that even if we were to, say, for example, have an EU manufacturer, a lot of the bigger companies have sites dotted around the EU. If they have to use manufacturing capacity from one of their other sites, that we'd still get that same quality output from them.
Secondary question, Rachel. It's gone completely out of my head. I was going to ask you, so I do apologise for saying. Is there any penalty to us as a district council if we don't get our rollout by a certain date, a financial penalty?
It's a good question. Not that I'm aware of. The obligation is on us to make sure we're compliant by the 1st of April. But I imagine as long as we can demonstrate we're doing everything we can. RAP have done a lot of work advising DEFRA of the manufacturing capacity in the UK, both for vehicles and for the caddies. We'll be working on getting the vehicles procured with the contractor once that's in place. If we commence the caddy procurement in February, that's over a year in advance. So I'd like to think that as long as we can demonstrate everything's in motion, if there's something beyond our control that happens that delays the start, we should be able to justify that to DEFRA.
Councillor Vince-Maric.
I'd just like to, because digital waste tracking is coming in, just wondered if it'd be something that you could look at to tag the bins, and you'd probably be ahead of the tracking system that's going to be introduced with the digital waste tracking. And just on another note, Birmingham have just taken back on board the clinical waste. They are doing it in-house. So we have to be wary of the traps of the digital waste and the waste tracking. We might just be able to get
a little something that we can track this, and you'll be ahead of the handicapper, if you understand, Mark. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
No, that's a good point. Thank you for that.
Councillor Steele?
Thank you, Chairman. I don't know if I've missed this. Is there a standard size for the internal container? So there won't be any arguing, sales staff saying we wanted this size. And are they made from recycled plastic?
There's two standard sizes. There's a 5 litre or a 7 litre internal, and the external come in 25 or 35. So Newcastle under Lyme, they've run it for a long time. They've been giving us advice on which sizes they've found work best, and generally there seems to be consensus on those, which is good. Recycled plastic is interesting in the manufacture of bins. So most manufacturers do use a blend of virgin and recycled plastic. The recycled plastic bins don't tend to be as hardy as the virgin plastic bins, so you get a higher turnover. But it does seem to be the standard approach now that there is at least a proportionate blend of recycled plastics in them as standard.
The size, the 5 litre or 7, is that mandatory whole country? Is that what? Because does everybody know how big one of those is? I mean, a 5 litre tin of paint is like that big, isn't it? Yeah. Somewhat similar to that. Because we've just had a new kitchen. I don't think we've got room under the sink.
Yeah, they're. I should have brought them in with me today. I've got a couple of samples. Yeah, kind of. The smaller ones, I think, are what we're going with, the 5 litre, because people will want to empty them quite regularly. They won't want to sitting around. There's no mandated size for them, but the manufacturers tend to just make those two sizes.
Thank you, councillors. I will now go to recommendation 7 point. Councillor Brindley?
Sorry, Chair.
Brindle,
Just
sorry.
2 quick questions. You mentioned DEFRA will give us the money, but I don't know if it's top secret. You never said how much. So I was going to work out how much it would cost them per house. So I was waiting for that. And the other question is, as it's been said, the sell-by date of these, are we looking at 5 years, 3 weeks, 2 months? What we're looking before they actually fail or are expected to fail?
Come back on the first one, Councillor Brindle. We've admitted all prices from the document as it's commercially sensitive information. Essentially, we're putting that information out there, giving a provider a figure to work up to, so that information has been admitted from the report. So it's not in there, but that money has come from central government to deliver this. So the bulk of the project will be delivered with external money. But as Rachel highlighted, should we not have enough money for the caddies, we have got money within the NTFS for the capital waste containers, which we'll use. So we won't be worse off as a council.
So by date depends how they're used and treated. We usually get around an average of 10 years out of a bin. The older ones last a lot longer. There are some very old ones out there. But we do get some that turn over within 5 years, if they're particularly heavy, if they're overfilled. So there's a little bit of a usage element in them, but we're not looking to replace them every year or sort of at that frequency.
Thank you, members. I will now try again. Recommendation 7.1. Members scrutinise the proposal for Staffordshire County Council South Staffordshire Council to participate in the joint procurement of food waste caddies alongside other Staffordshire councils and provide comments to Cabinet members as appropriate. All in agreement? Thank you, members. I will now go to Lorraine Foakes, who is doing the work programme.
So members, very briefly, because it's been quite a long meeting, the work programme is as set out in your papers. Obviously, the updates are there as shown. Happy to take any questions, but it's just really so members have that continuous oversight of the work programme and ensure delivery against that work programme. And the recommendation, members, is that you note the work programme. Thank you.
Questions? No, thank you. Thank you, members. I will now thank everybody for attending. I would also like to thank every officer for all the hard work they've done on these jobs today, and have a good evening. I will now close the meeting.